Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Crypto Events Announcements. My name is still Eugene Ramanenko, and I'm still your Crypto MC. And please welcome my today's upcoming guest. He is Jack Nikogosyan. He is CEO of Aryze, and he is broadcasting right now from Copenhagen, Denmark. And he will also be the distinguished speaker of Chainpoint 19 conference, which will be hosted in Yerevan, Crypto Armenia, in October 14 and 15 by brilliant Vigen Arushanyan and Armenian Blockchain Association NOR team. Jack, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
For those guys who don't know who you are and what you do, could you please give us a little bit intro and tell us briefly about yourself and what are you working on in the blockchain industry?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, thank you so much for having us on the show, and really exciting also to go to Armenia for first time going to Armenia for a professional work-related thing. Usually I'm just visiting family, but this time it will be two-sided. So super exciting, and thank you for the introduction. I'm the founder and CEO of Aryze, which is a company in Denmark. What we are creating is, let me try and keep it simple, because blockchain and crypto, it's not simple. What we're trying to do is to create a range of stable coins, meaning cryptocurrencies that do not fluctuate as much in price. And the easiest way to explain it is that we're creating an e-dollar, a digital dollar. So right now, the main focus is on creating a dollar-backed stablecoin to create a payment ecosystem that doesn't have the traditional borders, the traditional geographical borders, as regular payment solutions are. So we're a stable coin issuing company from Copenhagen.
Why did you decide to share your ideas and experience at the Chainpoint 19 conference?
Our approach with Armenia started almost a year ago. So initially, I remember doing a few webinars and speaking to some Armenian students and some universities and general knowledge sharing. And we also do that many other places. So we have a presence in the Philippines, in Singapore, in London, and establishing ourselves in Kenya and in the US. So Armenia started with the same kind of community approach. But what we very quickly learned is that Armenia has a lot of interesting talent. And especially now with the last few months, everything happening in Armenia, there's a lot of attention towards startups and fintech and trying to make something better, you know? So the interest towards Armenia has just grown. It wasn't the plan 6 months ago or 12 months ago to look so much into the Armenian market. But I must admit that we have a bunch of community approaches and community building approaches, as well as scouting for developers. Armenia has a lot of really, really smart people, a lot of mathematicians, a lot of security experts, a lot of cryptographers. And for us to just have a presence in these communities, I think is really, really important. So yeah.
Yeah, well known that Armenian guys have always been very clever in all times, by decades, in medicine, for example, in mathematics, in finances, absolutely, and so on. Absolutely. I always ask speakers from different countries about conditions for blockchain and crypto startups. I don't really know anything about Denmark. I know about Switzerland and Europe, and other countries like Singapore, but in Europe, generally, what are the conditions for blockchain startups in Denmark directly, and did you compare it with current conditions in Armenia? And is Armenia becoming a great Caucasian crypto valley for the blockchain startups, by opinion?
Some really good points that you mentioned, and just to try to decipher it. Denmark, I don't want to say that Denmark is one of the leading experts in blockchain regulation. Denmark is not the first country to do these things. However, Denmark is extremely experienced and extremely secure. So everything is like structured, you know, everything is in order and everything has its way. However, that also means then if you want to do something a bit different, you don't really fit inside a box. So, for example, in terms of Aryze, headquarters is in Copenhagen. Yes, we're a Danish company, but we are structuring ourselves out of the US, out of Europe in different jurisdictions in order to operate, for example, in Kenya using the Kenyan shilling. We are exploring what kind of licenses is required, what kind of e-money permissions is needed in Kenya. So we're not creating a solution for Denmark. We're creating a solution kind of with the roots in Denmark, but we're going to operate globally. So for example, in Armenia, it's actually a bit different because while in Denmark, you have all of the boxes in place, and for decades, financial structures have been in place, so you can start, applying for an e-money license or whatever you want, right? But places, for example, in Armenia, which are not as mature and have not been in the same fintech space for 25 years, they have often a bit more agility. They can do stuff that other traditional markets cannot. So that's why when you look at, just to mention a few, Estonia, when you look at countries surrounding Kenya, when you look in the Philippines and try to understand how do you get the e-money license, how do you get a banking permission, how do you get this and that and this and that, well, often you can get like special permission or get fast-tracked into a new program that is specifically designed for these kinds of fintechs. But these new programs, they come out of Malta, out of Gibraltar, out of Liechtenstein, out of all kinds of countries, right? Because they have a bit more agility. So my recommendation towards Armenian entrepreneurs would be try and see if you can do something together with the government. To a European entrepreneur, I would say try to do something which fits into one of the boxes placed by the European government. Like, don't try to push any borders. Don't try to make them do something new, because it's going to take them 20 years to even think about doing something new. But other places are not as, tied up. And especially now in Armenia, with all of the changes in government and all of the new approaches happening, I think that there's a bunch of opportunities to work with the regulators on, university payment systems and medical solutions and insurance for the people and all kinds of stuff together with the government and together with the regulators. And that's because Armenia is lucky. You don't have 50 years of boxes that you fit into, but now you can kind of start over, try and make something new. And that's also why I am planning on exploring Armenia and the Armenian markets to understand what are the requirements to get the proper permissions and the proper certificates and banking partners in, for example, Armenia. And where in some European countries Western countries, getting your own banking license might take years and years. And then on the other end, if you look in Kenya, you might be able to join a fast track program to actually get the permissions in just a few months. And exploring these kinds of opportunities together with the Armenian legislation and the financial regulators in Armenia, the new financial regulators in Armenia and the new mindset, I think that that can go very, very far. Armenia could become the kind of the Silicon Valley of that area. It could appeal both to the Middle East. It could appeal both to the Russian-speaking countries, and also has quite a big relations to Europe. Not only religious similarities, but generally Armenia could become this neutral hub in that area, which I think could be phenomenal. I think that could be really, really awesome.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. Of course, we will be covering the questions, issues about regulating and law situation, the current law situation in Armenia right now. Please find an interview with Gevor Kakaban. He will be the speaker and the law from the legal position. And we'll be talking about these points and government relations and so on. And of course, it proves that our industry, our world now is borderless, and our industry is especially borderless. So what is country? Territory, people are everywhere, clear people are everywhere. And Armenian guys are everywhere in the world.
But I think that's the world is becoming more and more globalized. And as a response to that globalization, we saw the rise of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum and these open projects, right? But so now Bitcoin has been around for more than a decade now, right? Almost. And there are still many issues with using traditional cryptocurrencies. Now, if I was a magician and I could snap my fingers and everybody on this planet used Bitcoin, maybe we could imagine this kind of ecosystem where everybody pays in Bitcoin. But the fact is that today we don't pay in Bitcoin, we pay using money. Whether that is dollars or euro or Danish krona or Armenian dram, it doesn't really matter because central banks will issue sovereign currencies and governments will ask for central banks to issue sovereign currencies. That's how it works. And that change is not going to happen just because Bitcoin is invented. Now, 10 years into Bitcoin's timeline, if we just look at how much is actually used by enterprises, by large scale treasuries, by all kinds of traditional businesses, it's not very much. Because the thing is that if a company has 400,000 employees and they want to pay out salaries to 100,000 freelancers, well, they have to pay out in dollars and euro and yen and all kinds of currencies that these people need to use to pay their bills, to buy groceries. Entire ecosystems function on top of money, traditional money. But the problem then arises when, well, if I have money, $100 bill in my hand, and I give it to you, well, it's free. It's a peer-to-peer transactions between me and you in paper. But as soon as this becomes digital, and I put the money, let's say I put $100 in a bank account, then I can only move it with the bank's APIs, in the bank's opening hours, not in the weekends, only to a correspondent bank, only through these networks, the chips and chaps and SAPAN networks and the IBAN protocols and all of these legacy systems, right? So when you have $100 or say 1,000 dram and you put that into a bank in Armenia, well, that 1,000 dram is actually now the bank's. And what you receive in turn is what's called an IOU. So you essentially have this money in the bank. You can withdraw it unless the bank goes away or goes bankrupt or something happens. So now to summarize the issue, cryptocurrency came, but it can't really be used today because it's volatile, the price goes up and down, and it's not really money, so it's extremely tough to regulate. And on the other side, you have digital money in a bank, which is easy to regulate, but it's very expensive to transfer. That's why I cannot send 10 krona to my cousin in Armenia, because before it goes from krona to dollar, from dollar to dram, and then before my cousin receives the money, it's almost lost in transaction fees. Aryze is creating a system. So I mentioned we're making a digital dollar. In our ecosystem, the way it works is that when we receive a deposit of $100 into a bank, into a partner bank or our own bank, we do not keep the money in a bank account because banks, they issue credit and they lend money to other people, right? That's how banks work. We create a full reserve banking model where the $100 that we received is placed in the Central Bank of America, in the Federal Reserve. The 100 euro we receive will be placed in the European Central Bank. The 1,000 dram that we receive will be placed in the Central Bank of Armenia. And in this way, we create an e-money ecosystem where your electronic dollars are fully backed by the state that issued them. And your electronic euros are fully backed by the European Central Bank. In that sense, it is not a bank deposit. It's actually a copy of a physical paper note. And that has a bunch of advantages for businesses. For example, no settlement times. If I want to transfer you $1 million, I don't need to wait for 3, 4, 5 banks to make the actual transfer. Aryze creates this system where instead of moving money all over the world constantly, we want to keep money still and then use blockchain technology to transfer ownership of this money. So if I have 100 electronic dollars and I send you $1, this $1 doesn't move from my bank to your bank. What actually happens is the money is kept still in the Federal Reserve Bank as an overnight deposit. And we use blockchain to transfer ownership. So now you own this $1 and then you send a cent to somebody, a friend. And again, you don't transfer the actual money, you transfer ownership of money. And that ecosystem is very interesting because suddenly large corporations, they can move money around the world with the same advantages as seen behind cryptocurrency. So instant settlement, smart contracts, and the whole programmable money with escrow services and digital cash management, and not even to mention security. So if you have $1 million in Colombia, kept in a bank in Colombia, often what you would do as a corporation is, for example, on Friday, you would move the money away over the weekend, and then on Monday, you would move the money back in because maybe you don't trust the banks over the weekend. That's the problem with bank deposits. There is something called credit risk, because the banks, they take a risk on your deposit by lending it to other people. Aryze will not lend out money. So money that you hold, we're just the custodial of that money. Like keeping money under your mattress. It is yours, and you can move it however you want to. We just provide the mattress.
So, Jack, by your opinion, what are the main trends right now in the blockchain industry?
I absolutely think the stable coins are one of them. So we've seen, everybody from JP Morgan to Gemini, it's called Gemini coin, Gemini dollar, made by the Winklevoss brothers. And a lot of stable coins are becoming issued. But for example, the JP Morgan coin or the Tether dollar, they're both dollar-backed stable coins. But the actual dollar behind these stable coins, they are in bank accounts, in underlying bank accounts. So one JP Morgan coin on a blockchain is actually the same as $1 in JP Morgan. So whether you have a bank account or you have one JP Morgan coin, it's equally safe, you could say, right? It's still bank money. And the difference is, again, if you have one JP Morgan coin, it is still JP Morgan's dollar, and they still make more money by lending. And so it's really important to understand this credit risk factor, because that is one of the issues why we have so expensive transaction fees. If a large impact investment fund needs to build a factory in Asia, for example, the IFU from Denmark, sometimes they have to go through 30 payment intermediaries, 30, not 20, 30. So that's because that one bank has another partner bank or correspondent bank. That bank has another one. That bank has another one. That bank has another one. And in the end, sometimes they make a payment 3 months before starting the project, just to make sure that the money arrives in time. And what Aryze wants to do is to make this system much more efficient. And therefore, we have to eliminate credit risk. And that would eliminate the need for having so many correspondent banks in the flow. But if you just use all kinds of stable coins out there, one issued by JP Morgan, one issued by a bank in Colombia, one issued by a bank in Armenia, one issued by a bank in Denmark, it doesn't really make the current system any better or much more efficient. It's just kind of this is called an IOU. Whether this IOU exists on your online bank or exists on a blockchain, well, it doesn't really matter if the underlying value can go away. So to summarize your question, stable coins are absolutely on one of the hyped conversations. And then enterprise level blockchains, meaning that trade finance blockchains which can accommodate the needs of big businesses. So blockchains that can fill the needs for anti-money laundering or have proper KYC processes. Because you're never going to have, let's say, Russia with Gazprom using a national digital currency in this ecosystem and then trade with the Americans and with the Asians. You're not going to have these kinds of systems on a blockchain if they're not regulated or if they're not somewhat audited, or transparent. And that's why that we can't really use Bitcoin or Ethereum and all of these things today. It doesn't really fill the needs for the big enterprises of today. So enterprise blockchains, stable coins. I think that, and that of course all ties into the digitalization of assets. I personally believe that many of the assets that we use today, stocks and bonds and other securities and instruments, gold, oil, all these assets, I think will be issued on a blockchain, because then they're interoperable with all kinds of other systems. So if you'll be able to trade stocks on the blockchain, for example, or buy BitGold or digital oil or some stuff like that.
So
To summarize, tokenization of assets, stable coins, enterprise blockchains. I think that's a hyped thing.
And finally, please tell us other thing. Whom will you personally recommend to attend Chainpoint 19? What type of person would most benefit from the attending of Chainpoint 19 conference in Yerevan?
I think it's really important for investors to look into the Armenian markets. It's not so much because the Armenia is a huge market and we can do a bunch of stuff in Armenia, but we can do a bunch of stuff from Armenia to the neighboring countries. So maybe some things that you couldn't do in a Middle Eastern country. You maybe have a hard time with legislation and regulators and working with fintech and all that stuff. Well, maybe you could do it from Armenia. So I think it's really important to look into Armenian startups. Armenia has internet. Armenia has quick internet connectivity. There's 4G. Everybody is online. So investors absolutely need to look into Armenian talent, Armenian startups, Armenian brains. And I would say that startups, or maybe not startups, but scale-ups, companies need to look to Armenia for talent. You know, people are hungry, people want to work, and best of all, people can work from abroad. Because the time difference from Denmark and Armenia is 3 hours, and the internet connectivity is super quick. So there is no reason why we cannot work together, and people can be in Armenia, we can be here. So absolutely, scale-ups, go find talent in Armenia. Investors, go and throw some money at Armenian entrepreneurs. I think that'll be a good call.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not been in Armenia and want to discover what Crypto Armenia is, and you are in blockchain industry and find it useful for your business, or you are not in the blockchain industry, please attend the Chainpoint 19 conference in Yerevan, Armenia, and sunny Yerevan in October 14 and 15. See link below. Use your promo code Romanenko at CP19 for a 20% ticket discount. It's also written below. And by the way, we can also meet with you at the Human to IT conference in October 5th in Minsk, Belarus, in City Conference in October 10th and 11th in Kyiv, Ukraine, at the Blockchain Life Europe Conference 2019 of October 16 and 17 in Moscow, Russia, Georgia iGaming Affiliate Conference in Tbilisi, Georgia, October 18, and of course it's Satoshi Invest Summit in Avalada, Georgia, in 30 and 33rd of October, and celebrating 11th Bitcoin white paper birthday anniversary. Please visit cryptomc.com. Link below and find your discount promo codes. Please subscribe on my Facebook page and YouTube channel, and stay tuned for next speaker's interview. Jack Nikogosyan, CEO of Aryze from Copenhagen, Denmark. Yerevan Romanenko with you. Thank you for watching. See you in October 14 and 15 in sunny Yerevan and Crypto Armenia at the Chainpoint 19 conference. Stay tuned, stay crypto, stay blockchain, and thank you, Jack.
Thank you very much.